Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Investor Financing Podcast. Exciting show today. We're going to talk about Airbnb, short-term rentals. Everybody always says Airbnb. It's not Airbnb. It's not a Kleenex in the short-term rental properties, but Airbnb has done a great job of branding, obviously. So everybody says Airbnb when we're talking about short-term rentals. And we have a great guest. He's got a lot of experience, former options trader, arbitrage, worked in arbitrage in trading stocks, and did a stint in a solar. You were an angel investor in a solar company, and then found your way into the short-term rental industry. Please welcome Jasper Ribbers to the show. He's currently in Panama. He's a world traveler, I take it, and you never know where he's going to end up. Were you born in Bulgaria?
No, that's just where my first business was located, but I'm born in the Netherlands.
Oh wow! Well, good,
Yeah.
good. That's good. So you've been all over. It looks like you've traveled to many countries.
Yeah, I've been to over 100 countries by now. I actually lived as a digital nomad for almost a decade after I quit my job in finance.
That's amazing. That's everybody wants to be a digital nomad nowadays. It's like it's the huge trend, and we're seeing that in the short-term rental business, right? Like you're seeing people that are doing these staycations, and they're going to different places and staying for a month or 4 months or 5 months. So you wrote a book, Get Paid for Your Pad. You also have a podcast there. You have several podcasts, right?
No, just one podcast.
Just Get Paid for Your Pad,
That's it.
and that was based on the book you wrote, which is obviously about getting paid using your pad. And can you kind of walk us through how you got started in the short-term rental business, and then now you have like these huge masterminds with thousands and thousands of members. You have when I was looking on your website, you have a get your feet wet in the short-term rental business for like somebody like me who's got real estate experience but doesn't operate any short-term rentals. I can learn the industry there. And then you have some high level where you have like some serious operators, and that's your other mastermind. Can you kind of take us back to when you first got into the short-term rental business, and then how you've grown it to where it is today?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I kind of accidentally rolled into Airbnb back in 2011 when very few people knew about Airbnb. But I was looking for a solution for my apartment in Amsterdam because, as I mentioned, I quit my finance job back then, and I wanted to travel. But I didn't want to do long-term renting for three reasons. Number one, it's you kind of lose control over your place actually in back in Amsterdam where I was because of renter protection laws and stuff like that. Number two, the ROI wasn't great on my apartment. And then number three, I wanted to have access to my apartment when I was back in my country. So Airbnb seemed like a way to solve those three challenges at the same time. So I just tried it out, created a listing, and yeah, it went great. I was making more money. I was loving doing it as well. It was really fun to meet people, or even if I was traveling, I didn't meet them, but I was still talking to them. So I really enjoyed it, and it was a perfect solution for my apartment back then.
And then when did you come up with the idea for your book? That was just kind of a progression of like you started doing this more and more often, and you decided to write a book.
It dawned on me that people didn't know about Airbnb. So I'll be traveling, and you meet a lot of other travelers, especially if you travel solo. And I was going to these like little communities of digital nomads, like in Vietnam or Thailand or Colombia. And then everyone was working on some sort of business. Nobody had like a lot of cash. Like everyone was kind of going to these low income or low cost countries, to try and build like an online business. And back in the day, it was, there wasn't as much training and courses and all of that and education available. So people were trying to set up online businesses and making some money. And I was just sitting there, chilling. And then people would ask me like, "What? Are you retired or are you rich or something?" And I would say like, "No, I rent out my apartment in Amsterdam on Airbnb." And then people would look at me and say like, "Air what?" And so I would explain it to them, and it dawned on me that nobody knew about this. Nobody knew about Airbnb. Nobody knew about the potential, because I was making 3 times the monthly rental rate that I was getting. So that was plenty of money for me to support myself. So I told some friends, and soon enough, like a few of my friends were doing the same thing. They literally quit their jobs and threw their apartments on Airbnb and started traveling. So then I thought, well, there's not a lot of resources on this topic. Why don't I just turn my notes that I had into a book and publish it on Amazon, and that's how it all started.
Amazing. And can you talk to us a little bit about your programs that you have now, your educational programs, and what they are and the different buckets, so somebody listening might get a better understanding of, like, where they would start, what does that program look like, and then what's the evolution to get into the high level mastermind? And I'm assuming now you have some big operators that are have hundreds of units.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're actually meeting with our mastermind members next week in Mexico. So what we do is twice a year we rent out like a big property that can hold anywhere from around 20 to 30 people. And then we invite our mastermind members, and like you mentioned, these are the bigger operators, like anywhere between 50 and 500 units. Or actually, we have a mentor in our group now who has over 3,000 units. But yeah, that's for the masterminds, really for the established operators, because there's not a lot of them, and they're all kind of on little islands, right? So what they need is they need to connect with each other to learn how to solve their challenges in their business. So the mastermind is not like for us to educate; it's really we're really the conduit between connecting our members. Then one step below that, we have a 90-day accelerator program. It's called Legends X. And that's really meant for people who have some experience with Airbnb. Maybe they have like a couple listings, or, maybe even one listing, or maybe 5 to 10. And they really want to build like a sustainable, long-term successful short-term rental business. So they want to make it they really like their one thing. They want to go all in on their business, but they need help with the business side. So they understand how to create a listing, they understand how to communicate with guests, but they need to understand, like, how do you actually build a business? How do you create a vision for your business so you know exactly what you want to build, and how do you create the systems and hire team members to operate the business for you, so you don't get lost in the day-to-day operations. And then after that, like, learning how to create a solid marketing strategy to actually scale that business up to 25, 50, 100, wherever you want to take it. And then we also have a starter program. So anybody who wants to get started in Airbnb, we have a do it yourself course that you just buy and you do it at your own time. And then we have a lot of free resources as well under the Get Paid for Your Pad brand. As you mentioned, there's the podcast, got almost 500 episodes now. And we have a blog as well, getpaidforyourpad.com, with a ton of free resources and blog posts and everything else. So essentially, we want to be like the one-stop shop for anybody who wants to get involved in short-term rentals.
Yeah, and it's what I like about the business is that you could do master leasing, arbitrage. Obviously, you could buy the property, which has some tax benefits potentially for you, where you can do these cost segregations. And in the States, at least here, a lot of my investors, they'll buy properties and then they accelerate the depreciation, and it offsets their W-2 income potentially. So, so your model's really geared for either arbitrage or somebody that wants to actually own the real estate.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So there's three models. There's the ownership model, where you buy the properties and you own the properties. There's the master leasing model, where you're essentially you're signing a lease on the unit. for like 1 to up to 5 years, or even an entire building with multiple units, and then you put those units on Airbnb, and you make the difference between the rent that you're paying and what you're generating on Airbnb. That model has lost popularity in the last few years because a lot of people got stuck with a lot of leases back in 2020. So a lot of companies even went out of business, and it just kind of highlighted the risk that you're running under that model. And then the third model is the management model, right, where you're finding property owners who want to get a good ROI on their investment, but they don't want to deal with any of the work. So then you partner with that person, and you manage it, and you charge a percentage, usually around 20-25%. And then so that's the management model. So I mean, the three models are obviously a bit different, but they all have one thing in common, which is number one, you need to learn how to run a management company, because whether you own, you're leasing, or you're managing for other people, you need to know how to manage these properties, right? So that's one thing. Number two is everybody needs to have a clear vision on what they want to build. And everybody needs like systems and team members in order to not be the manager. What we teach is people to be the business owner versus the business manager, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I've been watching my friend. He went from zero to five single family homes, and he's buying. They're like $1 million properties, and they're doing really well. I mean, he's booming. But I watch him with his frustrations of like, he got after he got his third unit, he got a virtual team member in the Philippines, and that team member's kind of running the business. But I see that my friend's still struggling because he finds it a little bit stressful. He's doing phenomenal. I mean, so this is kind of probably where he needs to get into your mastermind to really kind of look at it more as a business, so he can take himself out of the equation and not work in your business, work on your business, the E-Myth. And it's interesting because a lot of people that I get on the phone and they're looking to grow, they want to buy more, that they have like a total hybrid model where this one gentleman I was talking to, he owned 5 properties. He had 24 arbitraged, and the rest were managed. So I think you can take this business wherever you want. I mean, once you have the systems in place, you can really leverage. And the way I always look at everything is like, okay, I have limited amount of money, right? So I can only buy a few properties, or 1 or 2 or whatever. But then can I arbitrage? Can I become the manager and still, because both those ways, as the manager, you really don't need any capital. As an arbitrage, you need furnishing in first and last month. So limited, maybe anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000, $20,000, depending on how. And then obviously to buy the property. Some people are even buying properties, renovating, and then refinancing, and kind of almost doing it like they're doing a fix and flip and creating equity in it, and then pulling their money back out and doing it over. We call that burring in the lending side. So it's interesting to see all these models. Where have you found the most success? Have you just really focused on the arbitrage model?
No, I've always focused more on owning the properties, and the reason for that is it's become clear to me over the last like 20-30 years that owning the properties is a good way to build long-term wealth. So I've never really had the ambition to build like a large portfolio of master leases or management. Or managing like other people's units. I've done it, but like I've never had the ambition to really like scale that model. So right now I partnered with somebody, his name is Eric Muller. We run our business together. Right now what we are focusing on is the ownership model. So we bought our first property for this new company that we started we bought it in Idlewild in California, and we are planning over the next 3 to 5 years to buy around 20 to 25 other properties to build that brand, where we're owning all the assets, where we partner with investors. Because you mentioned like, not everybody has the cash to just buy all these units, right? So it's hard to scale the ownership model. But there's ways of getting financing, right? You could either, some people get mortgages, or they find other people that they can loan, where they can get a loan. But oftentimes they partner with investors, right? Because the short-term owning short-term rental real estate is, the ROI typically depends on the market, of course, but you can get really good ROIs on your money. So some of our mastermind members, they're really scaling that model where they're raising like 10, 15, 20 million dollars from investors, and then they go out and buy these properties.
Yeah, I funded a lot of loans for short-term rental investors. And so, the challenging thing is the projection base, right? There's very limited lenders that actually would say, okay, we're going to use like Airbnb, AirDNA data, and we're going to say, we'll let you use what the short-term rental. Most of them come in on these DSCR loans, and they just say, okay, well, we're going to get a survey done, a rental survey, and we're going to use long-term rent. And now, obviously, a lot of these properties don't qualify, but we do have a couple of funds that specifically will base the rental income on projections of short-term rental, which is great. And I think that's going to be more and more of a adapted policy. But oftentimes what we do is we'll do like a 2-year bridge loan. So we get them like 80% of the acquisition price. They operate it for 12 months, and then it's easier. They can refinance out because they have 12 months pronounced from Vrbo or Airbnb. So that's what we're doing on the lending side to kind of, like get in there and grow it that way. And then the 20% down payment and some other costs could be a joint venture partner, right? Like, so I could have a money partner. They could be a partner in the LLC, or we could just have a joint venture agreement. Because that's the thing. That's the way I would probably do it for my business. The cool thing is I know how to structure the deals. So now for me, it's just getting the confidence of like, all right, well, I'm here in Las Vegas, right? So they were passing news legislation, but Henderson, which is the city over, has a permit process for the Airbnb. So obviously, first thing is learn the rules in your area, right? I mean, that's like, what can we do, what you can do, and then where do you see people being successful? Like, well, one thing is I want to get your opinion on certain markets. Like, it's everybody wants to own vacation rental properties now, right? Like, it's in certain markets. So like, a lot of people are in the Smoky Mountains, and it seems like the cabins, they were buying cabins for $400,000. Now the same cabins 5-6 years later, $1 million too. And I'm in a lot of Facebook groups, and I start seeing people like they're not getting the same results that they thought they were because the COVID kind of amplified results. Where do you think that people are going to be failing the most in this business over the next 12, 24 months, in your opinion?
Where they're going to be failing the most? Well, that's hard to say. But what a couple things I will say is, number one, yes, I mean, prices have gone up a lot. Like, you always see like these lists that are being sent out of like, the 10 hottest markets to invest in for Airbnb. By the time that email goes out, I think you're probably too late, right? So obviously, if you're buying a property, like the price that you're paying is going to have a massive effect on the ROI. But I think the other aspect of it is, the big difference between long-term and short-term rentals is that when you buy long-term rentals, like, you can kind of predict how much you're going to make, right? If I tell you like, okay, Las Vegas, like 2 bedrooms, 2,000 square feet, this neighborhood, you're going to be able to tell me, plus or minus maybe $500 how much I'll be able to rent it out for. On Airbnb or with short-term rentals, it's much more difficult to say, because there's so many different factors at play, right? Like, you and I could buy the same apartment in the same building in the same location, and one of us might be making $2,000 a month, and one of us might be making $4,000 a month. And the reason for that is because when people stay at the short-term rental, what they are willing to pay is 90% based on the experience, not the square footage of the unit, or like, the amenities and stuff. It's really about the experience, right? And so, if we buy the exact same place, but I design it different, and I really think about like who's the guest avatar, like who am I targeting here, right? And I completely design the experience to make a small amount of people totally love the experience, right? Where they walk into the place and they're like, oh my God, this place is made for me. This is designed exactly how I would design it, like all the little details, versus just going to IKEA and putting some random furniture in there. There's a huge discrepancy in the amount of money that you could be making. So I think, to answer your question, like who's going to fill, I think the people that are going to fill um, are not necessarily the people that buying at the top of the market, because I mean I look at owning real estate for the long term.
Hmm.
I mean, when you think about 20, 30 years, yes, the purchase price obviously matters. Um, but over 20, 30 years, if you buy like a property or two like every year over that time frame, then in the end of the day, the effect on the purchase price isn't going to be as big as on the short term, right? So I think the people who are going to fail are the people that don't understand that it's about the experience. The people who have the mindset of like, I'm renting out the space, I'm renting out the place to sleep, versus I'm renting out, I'm creating an experience for a specific group of people, and I'm creating the experience to solve a need, and to really yeah, solve the needs of a particular group of people that are looking for this experience. So I think that's probably the best answer to your question.
Yeah, no, that, I was just thinking about that when you're breaking that down. And so there's, let's just look at Las Vegas. It's a destination tourist place. So if I was doing a more of a luxury home geared for, somebody coming to town, how am I going to furnish it? Am I putting Las Vegas type gambling casino photos on the wall? Like, you really got to get inside of like who is going to be going on to these booking platforms, the quality of pictures, the quality of the way you lay out your photos, the description, it's close to this, like, and that's really comes down to like, so I see what you're saying completely, that it's really, you got to really kind of reverse engineer it. It's not just, oh, I'm going to put this house on, it's got a swimming pool. And that doesn't mean
Yeah.
anything, right? Like, you got to kind of break down who, because there's also people that focus on these luxury type properties, right? They want to get the big houses because they like, that's their niche. And then, I've interviewed people where their niche is like, they're not really going for like these Smoky Mountains and these super tourist destinations. They're going for like the workforce staycation people that, and so like the guy I interviewed last time, he was like, he has 30 plus units. He said, I just do smaller units because those there's less problems. They're usually the people that are working and they're not like having big parties. And so that's been his model, and he's done it very successfully. And so that model works, right? Like, depending on where it is, but you got to really know where you're buying, because you can run short-term rental business in pretty much every market. Every market's got some demand. Obviously, there's more demand in certain markets. So when you first look at, so you're giving me some good ideas. So like when you're first looking at a market, you got to kind of break it down. Like, okay, well, are you doing this big kind of touristy, like bachelor party type of house, or are you doing, like somebody's coming to a conference and they're a business professional, but they don't want to stay in a casino on the strip? And then break down the avatar of like who's going to actually stay there. Yeah. So I never really kind of broke it down like that. That makes a lot more sense as I'm looking at the properties. And then obviously there's tools like AirDNA, and can you kind of give me just like a general framework of how you analyze a market, and kind of like would kind of like look at a market from like a far away and then kind of niche down and figure out where would be there's some opportunities?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, first of all, what you're saying is absolutely right. Any market, there's always somebody who's looking for a short-term stays, right? I mean, and it goes beyond like just business travelers and tourists, right? For example, we have somebody in our community who rents out a lot to to people who had a problem at their house. So, for example, like they had a fire or a flooding or something like that, and so their insurance company then goes out and finds like a place for them where they can stay temporarily, right? So this person partners with these insurance companies. So there's a ton of reasons why people need accommodation, right? So I would say like the rule of thumb that I always use is, would I want to visit this area myself? And would I want to stay at this property myself? Right? Because the thing is, when you think about like guest avatars, it's easiest to define that avatar if you're kind of your own avatar, because then you understand, then it's easier to understand what that person is looking for, right? So I mean, if I'd look at a market, I would look at a couple things. I would look at, first of all, I'd ask myself, like, would I want to go travel to this market? If I don't want to travel there, then I'm probably not going to buy anything there. Number two is, who are the people that are visiting this area and why are they visiting? Right? You can kind of make a breakdown of like the different types of guest avatars that visit that market. And then number three, like I would look at the supply side too. I would look at like, hey, what's available right now? If everyone's like, if you're talking about, you're in Vegas, right? So in Vegas, there's the people that come to party. I actually stayed with a group of poker players, professional poker players, one time in Vegas, right? So I got to understand that avatar. And going back to what you were saying, is like, it's so important to understand that, because these guys were paying a lot of money for that house that they're staying at, but it was completely designed for poker players. There was poker tables. It was the bedrooms were completely blacked out, right? Because they know that these guys are going to go sleep late, right? So everything was just designed for the poker player. So yeah, to summarize, like, like, would I want to travel there myself? What are the types of people that visit the area, and what's going on the supply side? So those are kind of like more the macro things that you look at. And and the regulations, you mentioned regulations. So when it comes to regulations, what's the most risky is if there's no regulations in place, but they're probably going to be in place in the future. Because if there's already regulations in place, then you know exactly, like, okay, what can I do here? And it's probably not going to change much. But if there's no regulations in place, and and it's likely that there will be regulations in place in the future, then you might buy something and put it on Airbnb, and then 2 years later, they put the regulations in place, and you're no longer able to do it. So I guess those are the four things I would look at a macro level. And then micro, obviously, you're going to look, when you're looking at the properties, you got to first pick your guest avatar before you pick the property, right? And then once you know your guest avatar, you're going to look for a property that's suitable that fits the needs of your guest avatar. And then you start looking at their DNA, and you start making projections of, okay, well, how much could I be charging? As a general rule, I always take about 60-70% occupancy. And then you pick a sort of like an average daily rate that you think you can charge, and then you take it from there.
Yeah, and then you run your numbers. What's the, at this occupancy level? What's the gross monthly revenue? What's the cost of your mortgage, taxes, insurance, booking fees, cleaning fees, utilities, and then net it out, right? And like, what's left over? And people always kind of have different rules of thumb, and some people say, well, if I'm going to buy $1 million property, it's got to at least gross 150,000. They say like the 15% rule. Have you heard that rule before? Is that kind of like the?
I'm not familiar with that particular rule.
Yeah,
but I hear all sorts of rules.
Well, people say like in long-term rental, you need the 1% rule. If you buy a property for $100,000, you need $1,000 a month in rent, right? And so, I don't know where I was reading that, but they said, well, like if you're buying something for $1 million, 15 to 20% was the range of like the gross revenue, yearly revenue that you should kind of like look at. Does that make sense? And so I was just wondering if that, but everybody has their own formulas, right?
Yeah, exactly. I would say 15% is probably on the lower end of what I'd be looking for. Like if I buy like a $1 million property, then I would want it to at least do 200,000 in revenue, but I would want to think that with some minor modifications to the property, there would be potential to have it go up to like 250, 300.
So like the property you're buying in California, wine country, is that like a luxury property or is it wine country?
No, it's in the mountains. So it's in a little mountain town called Idlewild. And the reason that we bought that property, it was an existing short-term rental business with 4 cabins. So when we bought it, the gross was about 20% of the purchase price. But the big advantage of that property was that we actually bought 3 lots. 1 lot with the existing cabins, and then 2 other lots where we could potentially build more units in the future. So then, you're looking at, okay, right now as it is, it does about, roughly 20%. We also know that we can probably increase that a little bit because we have like really good systems in place. We have guest marketing strategies and everything in place to maximize that revenue. So so that's one thing where we can improve the revenue by just managing it better. But then secondly is the potential to build some extra units can add a lot of additional revenue.
You're listening to the Investor Financing Podcast. We'll be right back after this break.
Hi, this is Beau, host of the Investor Financing Podcast. I appreciate you checking out our channel. On this podcast, we talk about real estate, investing, financing, business lending, and acquiring and expanding your business. I'm sure you will find some videos here that will help you build your business empire. There's a lot to see. Take your time and make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. Thanks again.
That's interesting. Yeah. And we're seeing that more and more where people, because of like the density rules, especially in like California, where they're allowing for ADUs and junior ADUs, where people can actually like start being very strategic when maybe it's a property they already own and live and they want to create additional revenue and it's a good market for a short-term rental or a mid-term rental. So we're going to see more of that, right? Like that's going to be another trend that people are going to start, because they can take their existing property and turn it into a cash flow machine that way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that's pretty. So Jasper, this has been really good. I don't want to take too much more of your time. I know you're a busy guy. Where's the best place for people to like kind of get into your system so they can learn from you? Would you say have them go to Get Paid for Your Pad first, or listen to the podcast?
Yeah, I'd say the best resources for people, whether you want to get into it or if you want to, if you're already an Airbnb host and you got a couple listings, but you really want to scale your business and make it your main, your main activity. I would say go to getpaidforyourpad.com and just sign up for our email list, because we send out an email every single day with advice and resources and tips and all of that for people who want to start out, but also people who really want to build that business. So that's probably the easiest way to get value from us, is just signing up for that daily email, and then also listening to the podcast, and at Get Paid for Your Pad. If you search for it on like Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever you're using to listen, then you'll be able to find that.
Awesome. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm trying to bring the best of the best out there that are going to like talk to us about really cool stuff that, and we're learning from somebody who's been pretty much nomadic for the last, 10 years, 15 years of your life?
Yeah, since 2010. So it's 12 years now.
Amazing. Yeah. A lot of my friends always talk about being nomadic, and there's somebody that's doing it right now, and enjoying himself and created a great lifestyle through short-term rental. So hope you guys were encouraged with this episode, and we'll see you on the next episode.